Hello. Welcome back to another episode of More Than You Think. I am Valerie, your host, and as always, this is a podcast about how political, social, and economic events affect and are affected by pop culture. Today, we are going to talk about how last time I was talking about how we are in a pre-war, pre-recession era. Actually, no, I was wrong. We're actually in a war and the inflation is up. It's our moment. Yes. So that's cool and fun. So we are at war with Iran. The gas prices are through the roof. And if that isn't classic USA, well, I don't know what is, but we are going to talk about how art is affected by war. And we are going to start with the Oscars. If you watched the Oscars the way I did, first of all, you probably got a free trial for DirecTV that you canceled right after the Oscars, because that is what I did, because I thought it was going to be on Disney Plus. And then when I went on Disney Plus, it cut off the stream after the red carpet. So that was really disappointing, even though I have the freaking Hulu bundle, but whatever. Screw it. Screw you guys. Ugh, disgusting. Greed. Anyways, I went ahead, got a free trial for DirecTV, canceled it right after the Oscars, and I thought, you know what? They'll probably let me keep the free trial for the 5 days. No, they cut off the services immediately. So screw you as well, DirecTV. But yes, we are going to start with the Oscars and how the two movies that were the most awarded movies of the night, if you know, Sinners and One Battle After Another, are actually very appropriately awarded for the point in time that we are in right now with everything going on in the country. It makes a lot of sense that those two movies are the winners and the ones that resonated most with the Academy voters. So let's get into it. Well, yes. Okay. So I had a podcast episode about Marty Supreme where at the end I was like, I hope Timothy wins that Oscar, right? Yeah, well, he didn't. Boo-hoo, wah, wah, wah. And a lot of people think that it's because of his comments that he made about opera and ballet. Well, first of all, honey, you don't say that stuff when you're trying to win an Oscar. But it looked like that comment that he made about opera and ballet actually didn't really gain too much traction until after the voting for the Oscars closed. So I actually don't think that's why he lost at all. Even though he was projected to win a few weeks ago, I don't think he was ever going to win. Instead, the big, strong, handsome, and also talented and much more reserved Michael B. Jordan was the winner. And here's why I think he won and why I think Timothy was actually never going to win. I watched Marty Supreme before I watched Sinners and One Battle After Another, and now I realize why they would win over Marty, especially in the world we're living in right now. Marty Supreme is about a young man with big dreams and a bigger ego and a very small frontal cortex, and it's a great movie about the dangers of living too fast and wanting too much and being young, and it's still a really important cautionary tale for young people, but there's not much political commentary in the movie, whereas Sinners and One Battle After Another, which of course were the two most awarded films of the night, were both stories about privilege, race, politics, and what happens when people believe that a certain genetic or economic or religious component that they have makes them somehow more valuable than other people. So a little bit of spoilers ahead for Sinners and One Battle After Another, but if you haven't watched them, they're really good movies, especially Sinners. I loved Sinners. Okay, I thought it was amazing. One Battle After Another, I didn't really appreciate until later. So I'll talk about that in a second. But yes, spoilers ahead. Watch them if you haven't yet. Two really great films. Don't watch them with your parents. I didn't. And yeah, it's just a little inappropriate. Personally, side note, I don't like freaky scenes in movies. I don't like them at all. I just feel like they're annoying and they're pointless and boring. Okay, I just feel like, boo, get that out of my face. So that happens, I just skip. I just press this 10-second skip button. Boo, lame. Okay, so back to the topic. Sinners. Sinners is a movie about the American South. It actually takes place in North Carolina. Wow, that's where I live, North Carolina. Yeah, because the KKK was in the movie. Oh, are you celebrating now that it was in North Carolina? I don't think so. But yeah, it's a movie about race, which isn't necessarily what we're going to war for currently, but it still ties in with current international events. The war we're going through right now is more of just like a privileged man, ideological, I'm better and I deserve things more war, but it still has themes related to sinners. We've got a president who thinks that it's fine and dandy to kill not only Iranian civilians, but also our own American soldiers. Oh, why did I sound like Tucker Carlson? What are we doing? What's going on? Yeah, so our soldiers are going out and dying for a war that really does not need to be happening. And it's all just rooted in like bigotry, entitlement, and us and our ally, mostly our ally, feel entitled to that land and that area. It always reminds me of how in the freaking iCarly series, they were always talking about the Middle East and how there was never peace in the Middle East. Does anyone else remember that? Like, Carly was always telling Sam, like, Sam was always like, oh, don't you believe me? Don't you trust me? And then Carly was always saying, like, I wouldn't even trust you if you somehow found out how to get peace in the Middle East. Like, that was always something that they would say. Like, they would say that every few episodes. Like, I don't know. They were always talking about that. But anyways, we have people in power who believe that, you know, their lineage or their religion or their ancestry or whatever it is entitles them to control land and people. But no, heck no, especially not at the cost of innocent lives. Like, can we not do this? Like, hello? Oh, can we not, please? But now back to those two words I was using before, which are bigotry and entitlement. So those are two very important themes in the movie Sinners. Obviously, Sinners is about racism against Black people in the American South in the United States. North Carolina, yay! Boo. Okay, but it's the same for every bigot. Self-entitlement and hatred, you know? So of course, this story is going to resonate with people right now. It always should, because racism is like an age-old theme. And prejudice is an age-old theme, but obviously the Academy voters are going to feel the feels for Sinners over Marty Supreme, of course. Also, it's just a really good movie. Sinners was so good. The music, it was really good. And the performances also were really good. I teared up. Oh, and that one guy, the Irish fella who played the vampire. No, because I would have gone outside or I would have let him in my house too, because he was charming. He was a charming man, and his hair, he did need to wash it. But I think like with the banjo and the music, I think I would have let him in my house. That would not have been good. Like, I would not have done a good job. Like, I would have, bad things would have happened to me. And I don't know. I mean, he seemed nice. He seemed nice, and he was just like, you know, he that shirt fit him really well as well. The outfit he had on, it was very simple but effective. Well, yes. But yeah, bottom line, I wouldn't have survived. Anyways, one battle after another. So, didn't love this movie when I first watched it, but once I heard Paul Thomas Anderson making a speech at the Oscars talking about how the movie is about how parents are guilty of passing their troubles down onto their kids and having faith that the next generation will be the ones to create the positive change, I appreciated the movie more, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what this movie is about. Because when I watched it, I was like, okay, there's just a bunch of weird stuff going on, and then like Leonardo DiCaprio is crashing out, and Chase Infinity is like, she's just kind of nonchalant. I don't know. It's, you know, I first didn't really care that much about the movie. I was like, okay, like, it was a little boring, and obviously whatever. But then when he made that speech, I was like, okay, I get it now. I get it. Like that, what's that, Danny DeVito meme? Anyways, one battle after another directly addresses people like our current leaders. They are elites who believe that it is their divine right to have power over other people. They believe that they are like genetically superior or something, or religiously superior, or superior because they're men. And when I say superior, I also mean that like these people really believe that they believe themselves to be more important, or like more valuable people, and they think that their lives are more important. Like it's narcissism, it's mental illness. People like this, they become rich and powerful, but their heads are filled with delusion. It's, the delusion that they matter more because of whatever reason. And that's literally like psychosis. Like it's mental illness. They're sick, and I kind of feel bad for them. It's just like they're not seeing the pearly gates, Oh, that's fun. Well, in one battle after another, there is like the secret racist society, which I'm sure there's stuff like that out there in the real world. And those folks are the antagonists of the film. And, just like we've got in real life, only difference being in real life, they don't actually hide it, our political leaders. But again, the Academy voting members are obviously going to feel like the story deserves its attention. And that's why it won Best Picture, because it was a very relevant story. It's, the themes are resonant with what's going on in the world right now. And a lot of people might be like, oh, the Academy voters are all elites. These are rich people, film people, Hollywood people who are just as bad as like our world leaders, and they're super rich and privileged. But actually, a lot of them aren't. So the Academy, although like some swaying here and there can be done, the voting committee is made up of over 10,000 people. I think it's over 10,100 people. So that can range from people like Taylor Swift to like independent filmmakers, screenplay writers, and studio owners. People who love making movies. They have to be invited, so it is like a kind of who you know thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're elites. It just means that they have like a lot of credits in the industry, or that they were nominated by someone who also is a voting member. So it could be like your neighbor who owns a film studio and has gotten some connections. It doesn't mean that it's like DiCaprio and all of his weird friends who date 19-year-olds. It still has integrity, so we're good. But those are just some examples of how art is being affected right now, how pop culture is being affected, what types of art are being given more spotlight because of the current events that are happening in the world right now. But I also want to use a historical example. So the 70s, yes, we all know about the Vietnam War and how there was like the hippie movement in that point in time, because like the war we're at now, many Americans did not agree with that war and believed it was incredibly unnecessary. And still to this day, it is kind of looked back on as an unnecessary war that we did not have to partake in. So at that time, there was the hippie movement. I already said that. But the hippie movement was, all about peace, love, and again, a lot of drugs were being done at the time. And that is something that I kind of didn't really mention in my last podcast. But again, like with clubbing culture and partying, drugs do become like sort of a fun thing that I guess people do. I don't know. I don't do drugs. That is true. I have been seeing those like Jacob Elordi euphoria memes where it's like how I feel after taking a Tylenol to stop my period cramps, and he's like there like tweaking or like being weird or whatever, and that's kind of like me. Like whenever I take like an Advil to like stop any pain in my body, I feel like I've done drugs. I really need to get out more, honestly. Not to do drugs, but just to experience the world and like see what I'm actually like dealing with here, because I feel like I've not been exposed to much in my life. Anyways, enough about me. But basically what I'm trying to say is like, when stuff like that happens, a war that nobody agrees with in the country except for like the people in power, that starts to evoke like a new attitude. It changes the attitude of the population. It changes the overall culture. It makes people, it makes people want to enjoy their lives more, because the effect that it has is just like, people see how frivolous and fleeting life is, and then they're like, well, screw it, I'm just going to enjoy my life because I might die at any moment because everyone else is dying apparently, and then they start doing random stuff, trying to experience everything, trying to just have fun, relax, and just like take pleasure in life, so that, again, similar to the 1920s, that does cause recession. But in the 70s, it was different because the hippies weren't as materialistic. Like, they didn't like material things. They were more about spiritual stuff and, of course, drugs. But they were more into, like, just... They actually, like, enjoyed being, like, non-materialistic. And, like, they actually, I don't know, it was kind of monkish. Like, they were like, let's not revolve our lives around money or objects. Let's just enjoy human connection. So that might be something that we see as well, and that's kind of cute. Of course, that did lead to some epidemics in drug problems and overdoses, and of course STDs. Luckily, we are in a slightly more advanced medical age for that situation, but drug addiction is something that's still very difficult for anyone to combat. So hopefully we don't see too much of a spike in those two things. Again, the 70s and the hippie movement were very important in causing these two things to rise, but then they continued on into the 80s and got even worse. So I hope everyone is being careful with their health, because these times like these really do have a mental effect on people and culture, and sometimes it's not that good. So yes, that is how war affects pop culture and just culture in general. Well, I hope that really inspired you today. I hope that you can go away from this podcast feeling inspired and happy. Seriously, let's all be careful. Girl, I'm so bored. Let's all be careful with our health. Anyways, tune in next week when I talk about, again, the Oscars, but not just the Oscars, just red carpets in general, and how women are disappearing into skin and bones, and how it's all rooted in misogyny, and how the phrase, let's not talk about women's bodies, is also rooted in misogyny. All right, I will see you next time, and thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Again, I am Valerie. This is More Than You Think. Love you. Thank you for listening.